This is a presentation for the Winnipeg Philatelic Society, Western Canada's oldest stamp club, and the topic is how to use a stamp catalog. So, how to use a stamp catalog. Several topics. Where are you going to get one? Which one are you going to get? And there are many, and you may end up with more than one catalog, depending on your collecting interests. There are, of course, instructions at the front of the catalog as to how it works, and you should read those. The part that I find most difficult is you have a stamp, you're trying to find out where it goes in your album, or you're missing a stamp in your album and you're trying to find out what catalog number it is so you can get it. So I have some thoughts on how you might do that. Then some thoughts on the proper way to collect stamps, and spoiler alert, there isn't one. And then some other websites and resources that you can use as you're trying to figure things out. So where to get a catalog? The first and best place to get it is free. Get it at the library. In Winnipeg, the Scott catalog is available in the library. They normally have this year and last year. So unless you're looking for very, very recent stamps, you can pretty much always get it at the library. You could buy a used catalog at a stamp club auction. I bought a Michel catalog at an auction one time because I was looking to understand the German hyperinflation stamps, and that was very helpful. You can also buy a new catalog. Our club routinely buys Unitrade catalogs, and members who want a new one this particular year, we can get a volume discount. We can help members get a new Unitrade catalog. So see if your stamp club can help. Which one? And there are many, and this is not a complete list. And remembering that the first stamp was issued in Great Britain in 1840, the penny black. The first stamp catalog, the Stanley Gibbons catalog, just referred to as Gibbons, started in 1865, and it's now worldwide, 6 volumes worldwide. A specialized Great Britain catalog, several specialized Great Britain catalogs actually, and many, many others, other specialized and other single country catalogs. The Scott catalog came along in 1868. Scott was a dealer, and he was publishing a price list. It is turned into a worldwide, in 12 volumes now, catalog, U.S. specialized and others as well. Hiver and Tellier, commonly just known as Hiver, 1895. It is France in particular, French areas, and also worldwide. They have a large number of catalogs in French, so that motivates you to learn some French. Michel catalog in 1910. It's the German catalog. If you're looking to be a German specialized collector, you would want a Michel German catalog, and they also have many other countries. Now you can also get a specialized country catalog for Canada. For instance, it's the Unitrade catalog, which uses Scott numbers. There are ones for published, printed ones for Australia and many others. And so if you are a collector of, for instance, Canadian stamps, you may find it useful to have a Canada Unitrade catalog and get one every year or 2 or 3. And there are many other online-only catalogs, dealers, and others. Now the issue, I suppose, is all these catalogs have their own numbering system. So a Gibbons number is going to differ from a Scott number, is going to differ from an Hiver number and a Michel number. So here are some pictures if you've never seen the catalog before. There is my 2011 Scott catalog. It's in 6 volumes, now 12. Beside it is the 1965 Gibbons Simplified Catalog of the Whole World from 1965, which my dad gave me, I think, as a Christmas present. So you can see just how the number of stamps has expanded. It's gone from that small book to 6 and more. There is my 1958 Scott catalog, single book, not that big. It's a little ratty because it's like 60 years old. I occasionally refer to it as I'm trying to figure out earlier stamps because sometimes the numbering system has changed. There's my Unitrade catalog 2021. I haven't updated it this year, but I may next year. And it uses the Scott numbering system, because the Scott numbering system's kind of North American. If you're in Great Britain, you're using Gibbons. If you're in France, you're using Hiver, and so on. Here's my Great Britain Collect British Stamps from 2007. Nice little book. Has pictures, images of all the stamps, pretty much. In terms of size, Scott 2011 was 6 volumes. It's now 12. But my 6-volume set, around 1,400 pages per book, or 9,000 pages overall, of which 60 pages are Canada. And images, they have all U.S. images, mostly in color now, and representative images of the rest of the world. If you had a 4-stamp set or a 6-stamp set from Canada or Great Britain, they would have a picture of only one of them, and that makes it a little difficult to find the other ones. Scott, 1958, I showed you that. It only had 1,700 pages. Same images as before, except in black and white. Unitrade Canada, 2021, has 776 pages as opposed to 60 in Scott. So a lot more detail. All stamps are shown, their images, varieties, back of the book, postage dues, all that stuff. My Great Britain 2007 Gibbons Simplified, 204 pages, and color images. I have an Australia catalog, 420 pages, images, and includes the Australian Commonwealth, Christmas Island and places like that, which are more than half the pages. And there are many others depending on your collection area. Google it. And you will buy a catalog as frequently or as infrequently as your collecting interests dictate. And you'll see I keep my Unitrade catalog pretty much up to date, others not so much. Now there are instructions for use of the catalog at the front, and you of course should read those. Catalog value. Now, to understand catalog value, you have to understand that that is the value for a perfect stamp. Expect if you are going to buy it from a dealer that you will pay 20 or 30% for that catalog number, but for a normal stamp, a stamp that is not perfectly centered. All perforations are not perfect. It doesn't have a beautiful cancel. Anything other than unbelievably perfect, it's going to be 20 or 30%. Further, you have to expect if you can buy for 20 to 30% a catalog, you will expect to sell for much less than catalog. The minimum catalog value for stamp is 40 cents, and that's basically just to cover the dealer's cost of having it in stock, buying it, and selling it to you. So don't think that if you have 1,000 40-cent stamps that that's worth $400. The value of 1,000 40-cent stamps, 40-cent catalog value stamps, is probably closer to 40 cents. Dealers have lots and lots and lots of that stuff. Don't particularly need any more. If you want to find out what market value is, look at the internet. There are lots of internet sites where stamps are sold, and don't look at the asking price. I sometimes will see a 40-cent stamp that's listed, a 40-cent stamp that's torn in half, listed for $500. Now it doesn't sell. So look at the ones that sell and see the value they sell for, and even at that there will be lots of variation because there's variation in the nature of the stamps. Grading affects value, and it's a real expert area. There's a company, many companies do it. One is Professional Stamp Experts. It's one of many. They have a website. You can read about how they do it and how the centering of the stamp under magnification is mathematically perfect. The stamp is perfect in all respects. And if you get a stamp that's perfect, very, very highly graded, it will be closer to catalog value than one that isn't. Now, how to find a stamp, and this is actually, I think, the hardest part. It's the part of actually using a catalog. And it's either fun or frustration. And many times I will have a stamp and I'm going, what is this stamp? I can't figure it out. It depends on the country. And sometimes you can't figure out the country. The simplest one that you can't figure out will be Helvetia, which is Switzerland. They use the Latin name for their country because they have 3 or 4 official languages. So they don't want to put it in French or German or Italian. They put it in Latin. At the back of Scott and many catalogs, they have a stamp finder, and they will show you the stamps that have funny names. The stamps of Japan, Korea, and China, they're all in Chinese characters, and so it's difficult to distinguish them. Once you've figured it out, it's pretty simple, it's obvious, but initially it takes a little bit of thinking to figure it out. Certainly a specialized catalog with lots of images helps. If you're trying to sort out a Canadian collection, a Unitrade catalog with images for all the stamps would help. But here are some tricks. Here are some things that I've learned over time as you sort through a stamp catalog. And here are 4 stamps, and they're all the same, except the first one's a little bluer than the others, right? And these are pretty small. They're actually slightly larger, I think, than the actual stamp. And that's one of the things that makes it difficult to see differences in stamps is they're small, and you may need a magnifying glass. So I'll make them a bit bigger. And these are all the 2-pence blue Queen Victoria stamp. And the first one is from 1840. And it is Scott number 2. There's no image in Scott for it, but it's the same design as Scott number 1, the penny black. So they just say, see image number 1. And it's Scott number 2. It's Stanley Gibbons number 5. And we'll see here that Gibbons has many more catalog numbers for the same number of stamps that Scott has. Goes from 5 to 14. Scott goes from 2 to 4. So they've got lots of different types of stamps. The second stamp, we will see there's a line under postage and above 2 pence. So it's actually a different design from the first. And that's from 1841, Scott 4, Gibbons 14. The third stamp is perforated, as is the fourth. But again, they're different. 1954 and 1958. The difference between the 2 stamps is there are letters in all 4 corners of the 4 stamps. They put letters in the corners. Each stamp on a sheet had a different letter number, and this was a anti-counterfeiting thing even in 1840, a long time ago. So in Scott number 10, there's no image because it's the same stamp as number 4, but perforated. So it just gives you the same image number and tells you that it's perforated. And the 4th stamp with 2 letters in the corner, see Scott either 29 or 30. There's a difference in the width of the line. I can't figure that out, too complicated for me. But Stanley Gibbons 19, there's no image for that one because it's the same as number 14. And the last one is Stanley Gibbons 45. So Scott has 30 numbers and Stanley Gibbons has 45. And in addition to those all being, and I consider them to be face different, so they're different, so I have them in my collection, but there are also perforation, color, paper color, plate number, cancellation, and watermark varieties. Some people will collect, their entire collection effort will be directed at either all of these 4 stamps or just one of them, finding all the different letter combinations from the corner. Now, these are 4 stamps that have high catalog value, and so you'll say, oh gosh, those are worth a lot of money. Well, they're not perfect. The first one, and the imperforate stamps, when you went to the post office, the clerk in the post office had to take a pair of scissors and cut the stamp out for you. So you see on the first stamp, it's really rather rough at the top. The bottom left-hand corner, it kind of comes in. At the corner where the L is, it's kind of scuffed. Now, it's got a nice wide margin on the right side, but a real narrow, wiggly margin on the left side. So somebody grading that stamp would go, oh, that's a terrible example of the stamp. It's not worth anywhere close to catalog value. The same thing would happen for the second stamp too. You'll see it's cut a little close at the top. The perforated stamps, you will see the stamp goes very close to, the design goes very close to where the perforations are, and they kind of miss it. So at the top, on the third stamp, there's a big wide margin at the top, and the perforations are in the design at the bottom. And I think there's a short perf. Yeah, there's a short perf on the third one in the middle at the right. And there's some short perfs on the top of the fourth stamp. So an expert would go, oh my goodness, these are not very good examples of this stamp at all. I want a much more perfect example. That sells for catalog value. These won't. Too bad. I have an example of the stamp. That's all I want. Now, the other thing about Great Britain is it is the only country in the world that has no country name. They issued the stamps first. They put the image of the monarch on the stamp, and as other countries started to issue stamps, they said, well, they can put their name on the stamp. We don't have to. We're putting an image of the monarch on the stamp. So as you're trying to sort out the stamps, the first tip is sort out by monarch. Now, I forget, but the first, up until George V, there are 200 or 300 catalog numbers. In the Elizabethan era, there are 2,000 catalog numbers. So there's an awful lot of Elizabethan stamps. The first 4 monarchs, I guess, are a little simpler. And the only problem with Edward VIII and George V, father and son, they look a lot the same. And so Edward IX only had 4 stamps, and George VI, they look different. The second tip is in the value in pounds, shillings, and pence, or is it pounds and pennies? So here we have a stamp, it's 31p, so it's not in the sterling era. We have Queen Elizabeth there, so she's the monarch. Has the word Greenwich on it. And not all British stamps have a date on them. This is celebrating, I think, the centenary of Greenwich, 1884 to 1984. So we're hoping it's issued in 1984. Great Britain tends to issue stamps in series of 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. So in the Scott catalog, there'll only be one image, and you have to determine from that one image that it says Greenwich. And all of these 4 stamps in the series have the red line through the middle, Greenwich Meridian, kind of clever. So it's one of 4 in a series. And we find after looking around, and we're lucky it is 1984, that this is Scott number 1061. And in the catalog, they will also have an image number. So for the 4 stamps in this series, they will all say image number A331, even though they all look different, because they're similar at the bottom anyway, the Greenwich and the red line. So you have to then read the description. And so A331 is the 16p value, but the description of the 31p matches Aries Transit Telescope. In my Stanley Gibbons catalog, it's 1257. It has its own picture, image 730. France. Again, a different country with different ways of doing things. Now, France often has the date hidden someplace as part of the design. In this one, they don't. This is General Leclerc, and he died in 1947. So the first stamp issued in 1948 is commemorating his death, 6 francs. And it is Scott 604 and image A176. There is no image for 692 or 692A. He was posthumously promoted to Marshal of France. And in France, Leclerc would be either known as just Leclerc. It was a nom de guerre. His real name was completely different. He might have been known as Philippe Leclerc because Philippe was his actual first name, but he took a nom de guerre to protect his wife and I think 8 children. So in 1953, he's made Marshal of France, And then postage rates go up in 1954, so they reissue the stamp in green at 12 francs. But again, there's no image for either 692 or 692A. They just refer back to number 604. Now, Scott, for France, has an index of commemoratives in which they call him Jacques Leclerc, which I don't think he ever was Jacques Leclerc. I think he was only ever Leclerc, or sometimes known as Philippe Leclerc. But that at the time, he was just Leclerc. It was his nom de guerre. Now, they do have an index of commemoratives for France. So if you're looking up Leclerc, you can find these 3 stamps, and there's 3 other stamps that also are of Leclerc. But if you had a stamp that said Leclerc, you could find the 6 possible catalog numbers and figure it out. The only problem they have is their French translation is sometimes very creative. I just wish they used the actual French words on the stamp, and then I could go find it, because sometimes they translate it. It's way different. The words in English are way different from what I would expect in the French. Anyway, France, date and value. As the values go up, you can kind of see the 6 franc, 8 franc, 12 franc era in French stamps. Though if there's a series with a 6 franc value and a 15 franc value, you can sometimes chase around because you're in the 6 franc era looking for a 15 franc stamp. So that's either the fun or the frustration of finding a stamp. Canada, also date and value. This is a stamp for commemorating the death of Cornelius Krieghoff. So he died in 1872. So let's try 1972, and it turns out that works. Canadian stamps have, in microprint, hidden various places in the design. Very hard to see sometimes. Need a huge magnifying glass. Sometimes you can almost see it with the naked eye. Other times you have to examine with a magnifying glass. And there's other times they have whole phrases in microprint. If you can find those, that will help you identify the stamp. Anyway, this is the 8 cent era. There's a 6 cent, 3 cent, 20 cent, 39 cent era. So if the value is 39 cents, you know roughly the date area that you need to look in to find your stamp. Anyway, we find this is Scott 610. It is the broken shed door variety. So on the right-hand stamp, on the far right-hand side where the person is leading the horse into the garage, I guess, can you see the little black line on the side of the frame of the door? That's not in the first stamp. So that is one of 5 varieties listed in Unitrade. It is 610I in Unitrade. So happens I had it. I decided I'd put it in my album. I don't have the other 4. I don't care. So what are the correct ways to collect stamps? And the correct way to collect stamps is any way you want. And there are so many different ways of collecting stamps. And I think in our club, everybody collects stamps slightly differently. There are many, many different ways that people do it. So the first thing you might do, and this would be when you got for Christmas a pre-printed album with spots for every stamp, people will say, well, I'm going to collect by country, the United States, and I will get one of each catalog number. Now, there's only 2, or I think now 3 people have done this for the United States, because one of the stamps, there's only 2 of them, and one of them's in the National Postal Museum. So you can't have a complete collection unless you have this one stamp, and it costs $5 million. So you have to be a person that can afford $5 million for a single stamp to do that. And there are other very hard to get U.S. stamps. There's some U.S. stamps that were printed and never issued. They're in the catalog, but they were never actually used to mail a letter. So when I collect stamps, I just want face different, and I exclude all those, what I consider to be, other people don't, silly varieties. So that's another way. Collect all the face different stamps of Canada. Now, depending on the country, Canada has one stamp that has a catalog value, I don't know, of $2,000. There were only 1,200 issued. Only 200 are left in the world. They're really expensive. I'm never going to get one. But you will read the catalog, decide which of the stamps in the catalog that you feel like collecting. You're probably going to have blank album pages. I do for Canada. I organize the stamps the way I want to organize them, not the way somebody who pre-printed an album wanted to organize them. Not that they pre-printed it wrong, just I don't want to do it that way. Some people collect topical stamps, butterflies, spaceships, caterpillars, dogs, cats, anything you want. Very, very free form. Some catalogs have lists. Say, here are all the American stamps that have a picture of a cat on them. And so you go and find all those stamps. You can collect an era. I, for instance, have a collection of German hyperinflation stamps, and I'm just interested in that wee slice of German history. Not the rest of German history or German stamps. German stamps, I find, a very complicated area. All kinds of states that preceded the formation of Germany, East and West Germany, unified Germany. It's a complicated area to collect. I hadn't understood that until I read my Michel catalog and read about the German hyperinflation stamps, so I learned a bit more about Germany there. Pre-printed album. The thing I dislike about that, though I have some, the album decides what spaces you need to fill. And sometimes they'll do something like require a stamp that was issued only in a souvenir sheet and is more money than I plan to spend, so I end up with a blank spot because it was a souvenir sheet stamp. Oh well. Back of the book. You have to decide which stamps that are back of the book you wish to collect. And Scott and Yver, for instance, have different views on what is back of the book. French semi-postal stamps in Yver, and I think in Gibbons, are in the normal numbering system, because in France, people used the semi-postal stamps as much as they used ordinary stamps. They weren't sort of special or unusual or not used at all stamps. Scott puts them in the back of the book, along with postage dues and booklets. I have colleagues that collect nothing but booklet stamps, and so on and so forth. They just have a variety of back-of-the-book government stamps, overprints, this, that, and the other. You can decide what you want to collect, and you will decide if you collect Canada, do you wish to collect Canada postage due stamps? Do you wish to collect Canada semi-postal stamps? Do you wish to collect booklet stamps? Up to you, any way you want. Some interesting websites that can help you sort this out if you don't want to buy a new catalog every year. collectgbstamps.co.uk. That is updated regularly. Every time a new stamp is issued, they come up with images of all the new stamps, and they have almost all images of all GB stamps. There are no catalog numbers. I've kind of given up on collecting the more recent GB stamps, so if I want to see what they look like, I can go to the website and I see the stamps, and it's like I actually had a collection. Adminware.ca Machen, that is a site that lists Machen stamps with images. Most face different Machens, including the ones that are different because of the microprint on them. It has more detail than I wish to collect Machen stamps in, but I find as I want to understand which Machens I would like, the ones that I consider to be face different. It's a very useful site, very nice site, updated regularly. MysticStamp.com is a dealer site. If you want to buy stamps from them, you may, but it has a free online U.S. catalog with Scott numbers updated annually. I think if you agree to accept approvals, they'll even mail you a paper copy. VirtualStampClub.com. They have a nice list of U.S. stamps. They update constantly, and so the new U.S. issues with images and Scott numbers are there and updated monthly. And they do the same thing for other countries. They do it for Canada, not quite as completely as they do it for the U.S., but Canada's there and other countries are there as well. The SwedishTiger.com is a collector site with images and a great deal of detail on U.S. stamps and varieties and prices and values. Goes from the beginning of U.S. stamps to around 1950 and has Scott numbers. StampCollectingWorld.com, many different countries, details the early stamps of many different countries with some images but not images of all the stamps. StampsFrance.com is a dealer site. It lists for sale French stamps with Scott and Hiver numbers to 1990 or so, and they've got Portugal and Spain and several other countries. Germany, the German listing is with Scott and Michel numbers, I think. Or maybe there's Scott and Michel and Hiver numbers. Anyway, interesting site, and if you feel so inclined, you can actually buy stamps from them. AntoniusRaw.com. This is an amazing collection. It's a collector site with images of stamps of many countries, maybe even all the countries in the world and all the stamps in the world, at least up to 2010. So there's an enormous number of images of stamps. And so if you're having trouble understanding the stamps of a particular era, you can go to this site maybe, and it might help you sort out, okay, I now understand the stamps of 1890 of France, because he'll have them all with images. StampWorld.com is a collector site of world stamps. They use their own numbering system, but they have images, so it's very useful that way. And they also have a facility where dealers can sell, though not every stamp is available for sale because there may not be a dealer hooked to it. So those are a bunch of stamps that I occasionally, stamp sites, websites, that I occasionally browse through. If I'm trying to update my Scott numbers for US, I will go to virtualstampclub.com and figure it out. So, thanks for listening.